After 2 tough weeks to kick off the new era, Nebraska finally came away with their first win of the year, and while we celebrated turning the corner, Matt Rule had to get back to work and evaluate which of these two QBs can give his team the best chance to win against the rest of the Big Ten. The run game was dominant at home, but with Gabe Ervin done for the year, Anthony Grant's 7 carries are the lowest we'll ever see from him again, and the offense that protected the ball so well in week 3 is gonna have to hope he's ready to keep that same energy. There's one more easy test at home, but Big Ten play starts less than 2 weeks from today, and with the easiest schedule we've seen in the last 10 years, it's safe to have hope for some big wins and still expect this team to finish strong and make it to bowl season. So today, we'll talk about the blessing and the struggle of having 2 good quarterbacks. I'll give you my thoughts on the new running back room, and we'll talk about where the Blackshirts rank nationally in the most important categories. But what's up, guys? I'm Connor Hayden, and this is Corn Crazed. If you're a fan of Nebraska or the Big Ten, make sure you hit the subscribe button because we're less than 100 away from 19,000. And if you think this defense can finish ranked as high as they were back in 2021, hit the like button and help us get to 1,000. But now, let's get into it.
Thompson lines up, goes deep, got a man, touchdown!
In the Monday presser, Rule announced that both Gabe Ervin and Rahmir Johnson are done for the year with hip and shoulder injuries, which is probably the worst news you could ask for since they were the 2 most consistent backs and they accounted for 41% of the yards on the ground in these first 3 weeks. Gabe's going to miss at least 8 games for the second time in 3 years after he was on pace to run for over 700 yards and he averaged 5.2 yards a carry. He still has 2 years of eligibility left, even if he doesn't medically redshirt, so I'd expect to see him back again in 2024 as a junior to compete for the starting spot again. But this is terrible news for a guy who's done everything the right way since he got to college and just can't seem to catch a break. Rahmir's in his 5th year and was hoping to match his production from 2021 when he took over as the starter back then, but he can still come back for his 6th year. It'll just be a question of whether or not he wants to give it another go. He was great out of the backfield as a pass catcher, and he's been one of the best blockers, so replacing that's going to be tough with way less experience behind him. The last on the season-ending injury list is Dwight Boodle, who's only a true freshman, so he's going to get the opportunity to redshirt now and come back next year to compete with Tommy Hill for the starting corner spot opposite of Malcolm Hartzog. He's not nearly as big of a loss as the 2 running backs, but losing 4 contributors this early isn't helping anybody. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel, and in this case, the light's a guy who started 12 games last year and ran for 915 and over 4 yards a carry. Anthony Grant had to sit out against Colorado to get his mind right and fully commit to protecting the ball, but as soon as he came back and had 7 carries for 46 yards against NIU, it was clear that he needed a bigger role, and with today's news, he could end up becoming the face of this offense. Rule had a great quote about adversity being a good thing because it's a chance to learn a lot about yourself and for other people to learn about you. And in this case, Grant went from being the star of the show to having to fight for time in the new offense. And when we watched him on Saturday, he made sure his presence was felt every time they gave him an opportunity. There isn't as much proven depth, but between Harburg, Sims, and Grant, I still feel really good about the backfield and running for over 200 yards a game as long as they can keep holding on to the ball and limiting turnovers. The depth chart got updated for this week, and we got to see a few changes on both sides. Obviously, at QB, Sims and Harburg are listed as co-starters, but that's just because Rule has no idea if Sims is going to be ready to go, so he's not going to list who's going to start since they're going to have to make another game time decision. The running back room is now just Anthony Grant and Emmett Johnson as the number 2, but Rule said Quentin Ives is the number 3 if they got to go deeper. Emmett hasn't had a carry yet this year, but Rule compares him to Rahmir as a 3rd down back who can catch it out of the backfield and said that he's willing to play whatever role he's given to help the team win. Quentin's more of a downhill runner, but he's still learning the playbook, so I'd be surprised if we saw much of him over these next couple weeks. Grant and Johnson are both healthy. Behind Alex Bullock, you got Jalen Lloyd and Malachi Coleman, who are both listed as OR, but my understanding is they're both still learning the plays, and for them to play, it's going to be about being mentally prepared more than physically. On defense, Jamari Butler switched from Jack linebacker to D end and took Kai Whalen's spot right behind Ty Robinson. And Mekhi Bayer is now listed as an OR with Chief Borders and MJ Sherman at the Jack spot, which is pretty surprising since he was just playing special teams in week 1. And both Sherman and Borders were expected to have a way bigger presence than they have so far. But it's just another example of this staff giving everybody a fair opportunity to play and not having bias towards the guys they recruited themselves, which is obviously a good thing. I try to make 4 or 5 videos a week, which takes me a lot of time, as you know. So I want to give a shout out to CarrickChronicles.com for sponsoring our channel and for helping me to keep bringing you content all season long. I linked Adam's new YouTube channel and his website down below, so you can make sure to subscribe and check out all the content he's putting out on his platform, since he and I have some different takes, and it's great to hear it from a former player's perspective. I just saw he dropped a video talking about the QB decision, so right after I give you my thoughts, I'm going to go check in with him and see what he has to say about it. And if you're on Discord and want to join our community with over 800 members talking about Nebraska and what's going on around the country all week long, I linked the invite to the Corn Craze Social Club in the description as well, so you can join us for free over there too. If you would have told me that in week 4, the most frequent comments on our channel were going to be about why there needs to be a QB battle, there's no way I would have believed you. But after watching Haarberg come in and go for 256 yards and 3 TDs as a first-time starter, I get why it's such a hot topic. Here's the deal. I made a video last week saying it was time to bench Sims and give Haarberg a shot. But my point wasn't that Sims needed to be benched forever. It was that we needed to let him cool off and get his mind right while they experimented with another option to see if the turnover issues would continue or if that was only a Sims problem. And after he sat out a game, we learned a couple things. Number 1, the turnover issue was a Sims problem. Haarberg technically had one, but it didn't matter if Mahomes was in at QB because getting hit from the backside clean off a missed block like that is almost always going to result in a strip. I know the Minnesota and Colorado defenses are much tougher than NIU, but Haarberg looked like he was making better decisions in general. He didn't stare down receivers, and he didn't make late throws, and when things looked questionable, he decided to tuck it and run so they could keep the drive alive. And number 2, you don't have to be a great QB to run this offense successfully. Again, I know it was NIU, but the offense found success running it more than 60% of the time, and when they did throw, the longest completion was only 26 yards, and almost everything else was short to make sure they didn't give the D any chances to pick them off. Had we seen this offense in the game against Colorado or Minnesota, sure, we wouldn't have gotten to 35 points, but they wouldn't have turned it over as often, which means the other teams would have scored less. The defense would have been more motivated, and the outcomes would have been completely different. So what does that mean going forward? I'm not sure. I still think Rule wants to start Sims since he believes he has the higher ceiling, but he's also said he's going to go with the guy who gives them the best chance to win and that turnovers are unacceptable. The argument is, do you want the game manager or do you want the game changer? I'd bet if you had Haarberg in as a game manager for Illinois, Purdue, or Northwestern, the defense would play well enough to win those. But when the offense needs more firepower against Michigan, Wisconsin, and Maryland, Sims might be the better option. The reality is they're going with one guy, and I guess Sims is QB1 as soon as he's healthy, but now that Haarberg's proven himself, the leash is going to be way shorter, and if there are any stupid fumbles or too many interceptions, Haarberg replaces him, and the staff won't look back. The way things are going with injuries and knowing how much they want to run these QBs, I don't really think it matters what we want. Rule's going to play whoever's available, and I'd bet they both get opportunities. And we aren't going to see a QB competition because they want to see Sims hit his stride, but at least we know now that if things don't work out, Plan B looks pretty damn good. Normally I'd be stressed out about all this QB talk and watching an offense that's still trying to figure it out, but the defense is so damn good and has been for 3 weeks now that we just have to hope the offense protects it and wins are going to come regardless. After 3 weeks, Nebraska ranks 29th nationally in total D, and that includes a game against one of the top QBs in the country and the number 23 offense in Colorado. They rank 4th nationally in sacks with 14, and they're tied for 24th in tackles for loss with 21. They rank towards the bottom in the red zone with 5 field goals and 5 TDs given up on 10 attempts, and they've struggled on third down, allowing offenses to convert over 40% of the time. But they're only giving up 20 points a game, so at the end of the day, they're doing their job. The offense being so bad the first couple weeks set them back a ton because of bad field position and skewed time of possession. So as long as they keep playing clean, Tony White's group will move up the rankings and could finish somewhere close to the top 30 once it's all said and done. Now let's look at the rest of this schedule and check in on the Big Ten West to get an idea of how this year could go. I'm going to break the West down into 3 categories: winners, long shots, and good night. And let me first say that even the winners in this division have multiple issues and they could lose a game to any halfway decent Power 5 team. So just because they look like they'll win the division today doesn't mean they will once we get to November. So first in the winners category, we've got Wisconsin. Actually, they're the only team I'm going to put here. They lost to a top 25 Washington State team on the road and battled through adversity to beat 2 Group of 5 teams at home by 3 touchdowns. Their crossovers are Ohio State, Indiana, and Rutgers, so they should go 2-1 in those 3, and as long as they can get to 2-1 on the road against Purdue, Minnesota, and Illinois, they'll be in great shape to win the division. The long shots are Iowa, Minnesota, and Nebraska. Iowa's defense ranks 31st nationally, and their offense looks a little better than it has in the past. But I say a little because they've played 3 terrible teams so far, and we won't know how good they really are until after these next 2 against Penn State and Michigan State. Minnesota's already got a Big Ten win, but it was ugly, and it would have been a loss if it was to any team who didn't shoot themselves in the foot multiple times. Their crossovers are Michigan, Ohio State, and Michigan State, so winning one of those would be a blessing, and losing all 3 would probably knock them out of contention. Nebraska is the most battle-tested team in the West, and their defense can hold any offense they face, outside of maybe Michigan, to 20 points or less. Maryland's a home game. Michigan State was already on the decline and just fell off harder without their head coach. And as long as they can continue to hang on to the ball and not give games away, they're going to be in the hunt deep into November. Illinois, Northwestern, and Purdue all fall into the good night category. They could pull off a win over any of the long shots, but they can't do it consistently. We already know the Northwestern story, and they dropped their first crossover to Rutgers by 17 points. Illinois barely escaped Toledo at home and then got crushed back-to-back by Kansas and Penn State, forcing Bielema to bench Luke Altmaier after he threw 6 picks and took 7 sacks in those 2 games. The offense lost a decent QB and a really good running back, but the real drop-off is on defense without their 4 NFL draft picks and the superstar DC who took off for Purdue. And then there's Purdue. They got beat at home by both Fresno State and Syracuse, but they snuck out of Virginia Tech with a win. The defense is surprisingly bad and ranks in the bottom 30 nationally, and the offense that's slightly better has almost no run game. They play Ohio State, Michigan, and a rival in Indiana as their crossover, so it'll take a lot of growth on D to make it to a bowl game this year. Michigan and Maryland are both undefeated, and we can all agree, beating Michigan would be a miracle times 2. But Maryland still hasn't played anybody halfway decent, and I think Tony White can slow down their offense. The road game to Michigan State's going to start looking more and more like a win each week because they might only win one more game before November. I see the comments saying Nebraska fans are putting too much value on a win over NIU, but that win isn't why the team got better. They got better because they didn't give the game away with turnovers, and if they continue to melt the clock, run the ball, and let the D and special teams win it for them, we're talking about a top 3 or 4 finish in the Big Ten West and a low-level bowl appearance. I loved having so much depth at running back, but the reality is the best teams get it done with 1 star and 1 rotator to give them some rest. Nebraska's going to need some luck to make it through the rest of the year with no major injuries, but the one sure thing is that having 2 QBs who can win games is more than most teams can say in this conference or anywhere else in college football. So let's hope that Jeff Sims can win a game too. After Michigan, as long as everybody stays healthy, Nebraska is going to be the favorite in 4 or maybe even 5 games in a row. So going into Wisconsin with only 2 or 3 Big Ten losses means the West Division could be on the line. And I'm not saying it will be for sure, but after the first 3 weeks and watching the rest of these teams play, there are definitely some reasons to be optimistic. But I want to know what you think, so let me know in the comments below. How short is Jeff Sims' leash now that we know Harburg can take care of the ball and finish games? Has the defense proved to you that they can keep up with any offense they'll see this year? And who's your pick to win the West? I know they all look pretty bad right now, but just like Nebraska's working through their issues, so are Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. But that's all I got for today, so until next time, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Go Big Red.